Coming to you once again live from Reach Souls Films Incorporated. This is Andrea Moses Pitts, founder and president of Reach Souls Films Incorporated. And what I have in this video right here is a lesson on Paul and the false apostles. And this is going to be coming from 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verses 1 through 15. So and I will be reading from the New International Version.
And as I've said many times before, please read and study these scriptures for yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the lesson. Starting at verse 1, it says this: I hope you will put up with a little of my foolishness, but you are already doing that. And in verse 1, Paul asked the Corinthian believers to bear with him as he taught a little foolishness. In other words, Paul felt foolish rehearsing his credentials as a preacher of the gospel. But he thought that he had to do this in order to silence the false teachers. And in verse 2, it says this: I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. And in verse 2, Paul was anxious that the church's love should be for Christ alone, just as a pure virgin saves her love for one man only. By virgin, he meant one who was unaffected by false doctrine. And in verse 3, it says this: But I am afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. And in verse 3, the Corinthians' sincere and pure devotion to Christ was being threatened by false teaching. In this passage of scriptures, teaches us to watch out for false apostles and false teachers, and to keep our eyes and our focus on Jesus only, who can save us from this world. Jesus is the only person that can save us from this world. But going back to explaining verse 3, Paul did not want the believers to lose their single-minded love for Christ. Keeping Christ first in our lives can be very difficult when we have so many distractions threatening to sidetrack our faith. And just as Eve lost her focus by listening to the serpent, we too can lose our focus by letting our lives become overcrowded and confused. Is there anything that weakens your faith to keep Christ first in your life? How can you minimize the distractions that threaten your devotion to him? Going down to verse 4, it says this: If someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you receive a different spirit from the one you received, or a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it easily enough. Now, in verse 4, the false teachers distorted the truth about Jesus and ended up salvation, because the Bible And, and in verse 5 it says this. But I do not think that I am in the least inferior to those super apostles. Now, in verse 5, Paul was saying that these marvelous teachers, super apostles, were both no better than he was. They may have been more eloquent speakers, but they spoke lies and were servants of Satan. And in verse 6 it says this. I may not be a trained speaker, but I do have knowledge. We have made this perfectly clear to you in every way. Now in verse 6, Paul, a brilliant thinker, was not a trained, spellbinding speaker, although his ministry was effective. He had not been trained in the Greek schools of oratory or speech making, as many of the false teachers probably had been. Paul believed in a simple presentation of the gospel, and some people thought that this showed simple-mindedness. Thus, Paul's speaking performance was often used against him by false teachers. And in all our teaching and preaching, content is more important than the presentation. A simple, clear presentation that helps listeners understand will be of great value. And going down to verse 7 through 12, it says this. Was it a sin for me to lower myself in order to elevate you by preaching the gospel of God to you free of charge? Verse 8. I robbed other churches by receiving support from them so as to serve you. And when I was with you and needed something, I was not a burden to anyone, for the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied what I needed. I have kept myself from being a burden to you in any way, and will continue to do so. As surely as the truth of Christ is in me, nobody in the regions of Achaia will stop this boasting of mine. Why? Because I do not love you? God knows I do. And I will keep on doing what I am doing in order to cut the ground from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal with us in the things they boast about. Now, in verses 7 through 12, Paul could have asked the Corinthian church for financial support. Jesus himself taught that those who minister for God should be supported by the people to whom they minister. But Paul thought that asking for support in Corinth might be misunderstood. There were many false teachers who hoped to make a good profit from preaching, and Paul might look like one of them. But Paul separated himself completely from those false teachers in order to silence those who Paul separated himself completely from those false teachers in order to silence those who only claimed to do God's work. Starting at verse 13, it says this. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, masquerading as apostles of Christ. Verse 14. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then if his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will be what their actions deserve. Now, in these verses 14 to 15, one Jewish writing, the Apocalypse of Moses, says that the story of Eve's temptations include Satan masquerading as an angel. Paul may have been thinking of this story, he could have been referring to Satan's typical devices. In either case, nothing could be more deceitful than Satan, the prince of darkness, disguising himself as an angel of light. In the same way, when the false teachers were claiming to represent Christ as servants of righteousness, they were lying shamelessly. And some important points I wanted to make in this lesson is, number one, watch out for false apostles and false teachers. Keep your eyes and your focus on Jesus. Number two, to keep anyone from deceiving you, read and study the Bible for yourself. Never take anybody's word for it. And that's the main point, that's what I try to stress all the time, is to read and study the Bible for yourself. Read and study the Bible for yourself. And number three, and also to keep anyone from deceiving you, is to spend time with Jesus. Keep him first in your life. Pray and ask Jesus to reveal all truth to you, and let the Holy Spirit be your guide always. Because if you let someone else guide you, then you are being guided by Satan, and you definitely don't want that. But those are the important points that I wanted to point out in this lesson, and I just hope that those points can help somebody. But I've come to the end of this lesson right here, and I just hope and pray that this lesson has been a blessing to someone. I really do. And I love you all, and may Jesus bless you.